And then Gail is the food systems analyst at the University of California Sustainable Agricultural Research and Education Program. I rarely say that full name out. We all know it as SAREP. And it's based in Davis, California. And SAREP's food systems program encourages sustainable community development and local food systems that link farmers, consumers, community development, and communities. And Gail's research and education efforts include direct marketing, farm to school, farm to institution evaluation, regional food systems, distribution models, food system indicators, urban agriculture, food security, food policy, food systems assessment. Whew. Sorry, she didn't want me to read it, but I am going to because it's terribly impressive. And this is really exciting to me. And, most recently, she's working on carbon footprint analysis in the food system as well. She's an associate editor of Renewable Agriculture and Food Systems and past president of the Agriculture, Food, and the Human Value Society. She has her doctorate in nutrition education from Teacher College, Columbia University, with an emphasis on public health. So a great combination. And she has been dedicated her whole career to integrating human, environmental, and community health through sustainable food systems. So please help me welcome our panelists.
Thanks everybody for inviting me here today. And I'm going to take off from Jerry's excellent presentation to go more into the farm to school research that's been going on. And as we all know, farm to school programs have escalated a lot in the last decade, from something like 10 in 1998 to over 1,100 today, or in 2007, according to the Farm to School Network. So they have been really increasing very rapidly. And what do we know about the impacts of these farm to school programs? Well, a number of evaluations have been done, but they've been very varied. The data is not really widely published, and the studies have been done in very different ways, so it's difficult to compare across studies. We'd all like to believe that farm-to-school programs are really making a difference for our children, and that they're choosing lots of fruits and vegetables on their lunch plates. But do we really know? So last year, about a year and a half or so ago, Anupama Joshi, who is the co-director of the National Farm to School Network, along with Andrea Zuma, who's a researcher at, well now she's not now, she's with Kaiser Permanente, but she was a researcher at Occidental, and I went through some of the farm to school research and evaluation studies that have been done and tried to consolidate what was out there. And they were not the double-blind controlled studies. They tended to be more the mixed method studies. There were some published studies that were in that camp, as Jerry described, and then a lot of them were progress and evaluation studies that were written for funders that really were not out in the published literature. So we went ahead and put those together, and the findings of that article are now available in the Journal of Hunger and Environmental Nutrition, if anybody would like to take a look at that. And I Xeroxed the one table from that. Unfortunately, it's very, very tiny writing, but that's in your packet. And wrote a list of some of the key studies that are part of what I'd like to do now in review. So what we did is we reviewed about 38 studies, and as I said, most of them tended to be the evaluation reports, a few peer-reviewed journal articles. Then we really honed in on a set of 15 studies that had a quantitative focus to them, and especially focused on behavioral outcomes, which is what we were really interested in. They tended to be more comprehensive in nature, and they actually described a methodology by where they were collecting data for the study. And they had a consistent way of collecting data across the population, whether it was a survey or focus groups or an interview with a protocol that went with it, something like that. So we imposed a certain set of criteria on this set of 15, which I want to tell you what we found. And I heard yesterday from the folks that were in the media, cut to the chase. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm not going to go over the details. I'm just going to tell you bottom line. So there were three basic kinds of behavioral changes that we found in this suite of studies. first were individual behavior changes, and those typically were student behavioral changes, but they also included behavioral changes of parents, teachers, school administrators, and others that had to do with the school environment. Then there were the school food operational sorts of changes, which had to do with the ways that local or sustainable or healthy foods were incorporated into menus, for example, in the school and farm-to-school programs. And then there were the farm financial changes, or the kind of behavioral changes that farmers and producers, the supply side, was making as a result of being involved in farm-to-school programs. And we also sort of, as a secondary thing, will comment on the related knowledge and attitude changes that go along with this behavioral things. But it seems like that the bottom line for policymakers and others is they want to know how people's behavior is changing. So student behavioral changes. One of the first things, and this was almost across the board in these studies, that farm-to-school programs really did lead to an increase in fruit and vegetable consumption. And it varied across the different programs, but it tended to be from about 25% to 84% increase in consumption of fruits and vegetables as a result of farm-to-school programs. The other thing is that across the board, very strong evidence that farm-to-school program was leading to an increase in participation in the school lunch program. So more kids were actually getting the lunch as opposed to bringing their lunch from home or not eating it. And that was an average of about 9%, but the range was 1 to 16%. And then farm-to-school may lead to positive lifestyle changes. And there were only a very few studies that found this, and that's why I'm saying may lead. And there was a positive correlation between social skills, self-esteem, increased physical activity, saving, money-saving patterns. I guess somebody actually studied that. But there was unfortunately a negative correlation between farm-to-school programs. Oops, I didn't write that one. It's kind of interesting. Between farm-to-school programs and hours spent watching TV or playing video games or using the computer. So that didn't connect with farm-to-school. So I don't think we can claim that.
Wait a minute. So the amount of farm-to-school.
It wasn't a negative correlation. It just wasn't a positive correlation.
No.
Yeah. So one study did try to say, gee, if you were part of that, then these other things would, yes, go ahead, Sandy.
Yeah, when you talk about farm to school, are you including the components of nutrition education and garden-based learning? Or are you talking strictly farm to school as it looks in the cafeteria?
As I mentioned, the 15 studies that we looked at were more comprehensive in nature, so it wasn't just a school garden-based learning initiative in that school or just a farm tour. It was more than, and it was also more than the cafeteria. But certainly the change in eating patterns would definitely be part of, we would assume that there would be a cafeteria component to something like that.
Well, I was thinking more in terms of, we've seen that, kids eat healthy at school and cook in the classroom and they go home and take that home, but it sounds like they're not taking the gardening home. So,
Why would,
well, because if they're still watching the same amount of TV, they're still playing the same amount of video games, and they're not going outside, so that's my question is, are kids going home and gardening more?
I don't think that was a specific thing. Maybe they're going home, but they're not gardening, but they might be doing something else. But they just couldn't relate that to a decrease in TV watching necessarily. So that was the one thing that was posed at the beginning. What can we claim with farm-to-school programs? We'd like to claim all these things, and so what do we feel confident claiming, and what do we feel a little less confident claiming? That doesn't mean that there hasn't been 1 or 2 studies that have showed this, but we personally don't feel that we can put it out in the media or tell policymakers there's a really strong connection